Hello, everyone. My name is Mike, and welcome to On the Grind. And we've got a very special guest with us today, Sheriff Grady Judd. Thank you so much for being with us, Sheriff.
I'm glad to be with you.
I appreciate it so much. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for your service and all the work you've done here in Polk County. I know people that I'm with and people that I get in touch with on a regular basis really appreciate the hard work that you do. You're a no-nonsense kind of sheriff, and we really appreciate that because I think that's kind of needed, especially in the time and day that we're living in today. So we want to thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Really, all my deputies do the hard work.
Yes.
I just coach.
Oh, you coach.
Yes.
Oh, I like that.
So they deserve the credit. They
Yes.
work and I talk.
Oh, there you go. I like that. I like that. Well, first thing we wanted to talk about was human trafficking. And we started to notice a couple of different statistics. They all kind of have different skews and different things, but it seems like Florida's kind of up in those statistics. Why do you think that Florida kind of is hitting those high statistics in human trafficking?
Well, first and foremost, I'm not sure about the validity of all of those statistics, but I do know this, that any human trafficking is too much human trafficking.
Right, right.
And I'm not surprised that we're at the higher end of the scale by whoever's data you look at, because look at the size of the state of Florida.
That's true. That's true.
Not only do we have 20 million people here, but we have a lot of theme parks that
Yes.
draw young folks.
Right.
We have a lot of beaches that draw young folks. And really, this is the vacation mecca of the entire world, just in the state of Florida. So it draws young folks, and human trafficking many times is young folks.
Right, right.
Now, today, are we going to speak specifically about sex trafficking? There's also labor trafficking. That's kind of a totally different subject. Or are we going to talk about all trafficking?
Well, I'm talking more about the sexual trafficking.
Okay.
Because that's kind of where my heart is to help
Sure.
kids is with that part. And I know the other part's big too, but we're going to focus more on that one
Absolutely.
today. One thing I noticed though, when you're doing these stings that you're doing and you're catching basically pedophiles.
Right.
And I don't know, I'm not saying inadvertently, but you've actually freed victims of sexual trafficking within these stings that you've done. I saw in the last interview that I saw with you that you actually, it was like 4 or 5 victims of sexual trafficking that you actually freed with that. How does that end up working with the stings that you're doing with that?
Well, quite frankly, that's the intent of the stings. We have 2 basic kinds of stings that we do. One deals with sexual predators / child pornography, and certainly there are victims of human trafficking there. And the other sting we do is a prostitution sting. Now, we have a lot of people always say, well, prostitution's, that's consensual sex by 2 adults for an economic agreement. No, it's not. Just get that out of your mind. That's not it at all. And the overwhelming majority of the time during those prostitution stings, the young ladies and sometimes the young men that are trafficked are victims of human trafficking.
Wow.
And what occurs is the pimps go out and they look on the streets and they're looking for the very vulnerable and the very young. Because one, the very vulnerable are the ones that are easy for the pimps to pick up, and the very young are very marketable and they bring more money. One of the scary things about all of this is the younger the child, the more money they bring.
No kidding.
So when we do prostitution stings, we're not just trying to arrest Johns. We're focusing on bringing the prostitutes into the operation, because you know what? If in fact they are being trafficked, they're not suspects at all. They're not prostitution suspects. They are in effect human trafficking victims.
Oh, okay.
We have great laws in the state of Florida. When we do these undercover operations and we determine, most of the time it's a young lady, is the victim of human trafficking, we send her into counseling. We go through a set of protocols, and that arrest record and all indication that she's a prostitute goes away. Because in fact she's not. She's a victim. And I can give you some examples. For example, we did an operation not long ago and discovered a beautiful young lady who was about 15 years old. She already was tattooed with her pimp's identifier on her neck. You see, these pimps actually use these young ladies as property. So they'll use them a while and they may sell them to another another pimp. And that pimp uses them and he may pass them off and sell them to another person. So we have seen these very young girls that actually are branded, if you will,
Wow.
or tattooed to show ownership by a particular pimp. That should shock everybody enough to want to everyone get involved in helping to make a positive difference. And that's what we do. There are times that they go and they say to me, "Oh, but you have all this prostitution, you have all these victims of human trafficking." No, Polk County does not have a per capita amount more than any other county. In fact, I would suggest to you that we have less because we arrest. But that's just like someone saying to us, because we make lots of drug arrests, we got a drug problem, and if we quit arresting people for
Right.
drugs, we don't have a drug problem.
Right, right.
So, traditionally in law enforcement goes out, works their undercover operations, and makes arrests based on what kind of crime is making noise in the community. Well, the most frightening thing is human trafficking doesn't make noise in the community.
Oh, wow.
It's quiet.
Yeah.
So some law enforcement agencies are so busy fighting the crime that makes noise that the crimes that don't make noise just go uninvestigated. That's not true with our agency.
That's right.
We know the victims of human trafficking may be screaming out internally, but not making any noise publicly.
Right.
So at the end of the day, our goal is to look out for the best interests of the victims of human trafficking and to seek out the victims of human trafficking wherever they may be.
Wow, that's awesome. When you're sitting there talking about these stings and how you set them up and all that kind of stuff, why do you think, in your opinion, why has it been so successful? Because this not just a handful that you come up with. You're 30, 40, 50 deep a lot of times, and you do these things 3 or 4 times a year sometimes, or
Sure.
even more. Why do you think it's been so successful?
Well, first and foremost, because our detectives are simply the best in the business.
Yes.
And we are passionate about protecting the very young, the very old, those who are mentally challenged. Well, who are the very young? Many times they're victims of human trafficking.
Right.
And we focus on the predators that are going after these young girls to ensnare them in this human trafficking or this world of prostitution. It's highly profitable for the pimps. And all they have to do is grab these girls and they bring them into their web. They promise them new clothes. They promise them fast cars. They promise them drugs. But the reality is these victims of human trafficking are not only victimized once, but over and over and over and over, and the pimp takes all the money and may give them enough drugs to keep them hooked, to keep them addicted, to keep them under their control. But they don't get the money. The girls are not getting the money.
And I think that's the sad thing about it, because they're being used so bad and they're being taken advantage of so bad. What's the average age of that you found in your stings that girls are being used for that type of thing?
I would tell you 14, 15, 16 years old. Sometimes we find them into their 20s. Sometimes younger. We normally don't find them really young in the prostitution stings. I would tell you 15, 16, 17, all the way up into the early 20s. And quite frankly, it's very difficult for us to get these victims to admit they're victims.
Oh, wow.
They're either afraid of their pimp, or their pimp has ingrained them into this lifestyle and they think it's cool. But many times, our victims won't cooperate. That makes it very difficult to prosecute them. Yeah? It makes it impossible to get them out of the cycle if we can't talk them into cooperating with us. So anytime we're dealing with a victim of human trafficking, we have to engage them with counselors. And many times we have to follow them week after week after week after week after week and encourage them to cooperate with us. There was one young lady, a juvenile, who was tough as nails. We followed her from juvenile facilities in Polk County to Hillsborough County to Seminole County. And finally, you know how we broke her to get her to agree to cooperate and admit she was a victim of human trafficking? She said, "You're the only people that have come to see me when I went to these different juvenile lockups. So now I understand you're really the only people that care about me." And we did care about that child, but she was so tough, and she was so committed to her pimp, and her prostitution for him, that we found it exceptionally difficult.
Well, it seems like it would be really hard to kind of break them of that cycle.
It is. And even after we break them from that cycle, many times we find out they go back into that cycle again. So we have to rescue them again, over and over and over.
What can the average person do, especially in Polk County? What can the average citizen do to help law enforcement with human trafficking?
Well, it's not just in Polk County, it's around the nation.
Yes.
If you see something or hear something, say something. You must get involved. Human trafficking doesn't make a lot of noise. Work really hard with your local police chief or sheriff. Demand that they do human trafficking operations. Demand that they go look for those that are less fortunate, those that are caught up in the bowels of this ugliness, and rescue them out. Demand that they take a positive, proactive step to educate in the community what the community can look for.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it very much, and we'll do that. We'll try to get the word out, and we're trying to raise awareness with this, and we appreciate everything that y'all have done with that.
Well, we care about the community. More importantly, we care about the children in the community. We care about the victims of human trafficking. We care so very, very much. So at the end of the day, anything we can do to work with you to keep our children safe and to rescue those in human trafficking, I promise we'll always do that.
Well, thank you so much, Sheriff Judd. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Grind.